Hey, Facebook. Tonight we're talking about reversing diabetes, and I'm excited. So when you pop on here, say hi. If you watch this recorded, go ahead and say hey to me when you watch it recorded. But yeah, let's talk about diabetes tonight. So a lot of you guys know that part of my journey, well, maybe you know, maybe you don't know. Part of my journey of choosing to get healthy when I did was because I was suffering from something called prediabetes. And what we're talking about tonight is type 2 diabetes. We're not talking about type 1, which is a whole different beast. But at the age of 39, I had probably been pre-diabetic for about 2 years. And, I just kind of thought it was going to go away. I thought, I'll lose some weight. It'll go away. I'll start eating healthier. It'll go away. And I kind of lived in that mentality for about 2 years. And it wasn't going away, guys, because I wasn't getting any healthier. Hey, Abby. And so part of my journey was brought on by the fact that I finally made the realization that it wasn't going to go away and that I was going to become diabetic if I didn't take care of my health. And so I did a ton of research on diabetes. And what I find so interesting is that, I'm a nurse and I'm a nurse practitioner. And in all of my schooling, I was never taught the things that I learned on my own through my own research. And basically, when you go to the doctor and you say, like, I need to lose weight or I'm diabetic, what can I do to lessen this? They're going to throw insulin at you, or they're going to give you that standard eat less, move more dialogue. And if that worked, you know what? We wouldn't have as many obese people, and we wouldn't have as many people on insulin when they're type 2 diabetic. And so I find it very interesting that I found all this information. And then actually I was sitting across the desk from another nurse practitioner about a year ago, and I was telling her I was so fired up about all the things I'd learned and how I was applying them to my life and how I had reversed my prediabetes into a very good A1C that's like way pre-diabetic. And she was like, wow, this is so interesting. I didn't know any of this either. And so what I think is really important is that the information is out there. And, as a transformational health coach, I'm actually helping people reverse diabetes. I'm helping, and if they can't reverse it completely, I'm helping them lessen the severity that the disease has on their life. And so we're looking at longevity. Guys, I don't coach a weight loss program. I coach an optimal well-being program. It's not about a number on the scale, although that's a starting point for a lot of people. But people are coming off of blood pressure medications. They're coming off of insulin. They're taking way less insulin. And so a couple of stories. I was just talking to one person today who's been on program for, I think, 5 weeks. It's either 5 or 7 weeks. But her A1C prior to getting started was in the 9s. And your A1C is basically a measurement of how you've been handling the blood sugars for about a 3-month time period, a 90-day period. And so anything over 6 is considered in the diabetic zone. And the higher you get, the more insulin you get. And so I'm going to try to keep this short, but I'm a talker, so you guys are going to have to bear with me. But anyway, she's been on program for either 5 or 7 weeks. I think it's 7. And she just got back her latest A1C. And number one, she hasn't been using insulin quite as often, or like way less often, since she started program and started working on herself. She's losing weight, and she hasn't had to use insulin during the day for like weeks. She takes 1 dose of long-acting insulin in the morning, and then she's good to go for the rest of the day. Nothing else is needed because she's eating in a way that supports her using her own body's insulin to deal with the carbs and the sugars that she is taking in through her healthy meal plan. And so, but anyway, today her A1C prior to getting started was around 9. And now she's been on program for 7 weeks, and it came back at 6.0. So how fabulous is it that she, in 7 weeks time, was able to completely reverse this process? And she goes to her doctor on the 10th, and there's going to be a conversation about coming off of some of this insulin because she doesn't need it. She doesn't need it. Her body's working the way it's supposed to now. And so even without the insulin that she hasn't been taking, one of my very first clients is a dear friend of mine, a mentor of mine when I began nursing, and she was taking 35 units of insulin per day. And a year later, she is hit her healthy weight goals. She's maintaining very easily, and her insulin usage has come down from like 35 units a day to like 7. And so I'm not saying we're going to reverse everybody, but I am saying that the less insulin that you need means your body is working better and you are no longer injecting yourself with exogenous or from outside the body into your body to help your body work the way it's supposed to. And the less is more in this case for sure. Less is definitely more. And so I have a new client on program, and I actually told her I was going to do a YouTube video, but I just decided to pop on here because I did want to explain the process of what happens with diabetes and how we can start reversing that need for that insulin. She was on day 3 yesterday. She's on day 4 of her healthy eating plan to get to her weight goals and to help her start lessening the severity of diabetes in her life. And prior to getting started, she was taking insulin every time she ate. Now she is only taking a long-acting insulin in the morning, and she no longer needs insulin. Hey, thanks, Nicole. And Jennifer, when you see me, say hi. And so she no longer needs insulin after every meal that she eats. So already we have reduced the need for medication. And so I absolutely I geek out on this. I like my other coaches that I work with are like, oh my God, this one has diabetes. Lauren's going to love it. Lauren's going to love it. One of my coaches' dad is diabetic. And actually I have a coach that's type 2 diabetic as well. And by the way, guys, we're only talking about type 2 today. And both of them have drastically reduced the amount of insulin they need. One's come off altogether, and her dad, who's like 62, 65, guys, I don't remember exactly, but he is no longer using insulin. And he's been diabetic, I think, for 20 years, taking insulin for 20 years. So it's pretty huge that you can have that large of an impact on your health just by starting to feed your body in a way that your body wants to be fed. Balance carbs, balance protein, balance nutrition, balance calories. And that's what I do as a transformational health coach. So quickly, let me try to keep this 5 minutes more. I wanted to talk about what it looks like when you become diabetic. So here's what happens when you eat a piece of bread. A normal person goes and eats a piece of bread, and then their body their pancreas gets a signal, hey, we need to produce some insulin and pump that out because she or he has sugar in their bloodstream and we need to get it out. So here comes insulin, and insulin comes along and says, okay, pancreas produced insulin to get the sugar out of the blood, and so it pushes the sugar into fat cells. For a normal person, it's a little bit, and life goes on. Your blood sugar comes down. If you were to prick their finger, their blood sugars would be absolutely normal. So one of the things that is so important is not being overweight or obese, because here's what happens. So now let's say this person has a little bit of meat on their bones, and let's say they're 30, 40 pounds overweight. And I think that's when mine started to hit, when my blood sugar started creeping up and my fastings were a little bit high. Let's say somebody's 40 pounds overweight, and now you eat whatever you eat that has carbs and sugar, and your body needs to respond to it. So your pancreas pushes out the insulin, and the insulin's job is to move it out of the bloodstream into muscles for later use, into fat cells if it's not needed right now, if you don't need any energy. But what happens when you don't need that energy right now? Your muscles already have enough glucose in them to use later, so now it wants to push them to fat cells, and the fat cells are too stuffed. So you've got a really full fat cell, and you've got insulin that's trying to push it in. It kind of reminds me of the train stations in China, where they actually have train pushers who shove massive amounts of people into these car trains so they can get as many people on the morning commutes as possible. And it just gets harder and harder. And more train pushers, these people, I think they're called train pushers, more and more train pushers are needed to push these people in, get them in. I mean, they're poking their arms in and doing all these things and just like using their whole body weight to get these people onto the train, and then they get the doors like barely shut and then they're off. So as we are getting more and more overweight, more insulin is needed to push the blood sugar, to get the sugar out of your bloodstream into these fat cells. And so one of the really good analogies I like to use is packing a suitcase. So you're going on vacation in a week and you've packed your suitcase. But as time goes by, you're thinking, oh, I really want those pink flip-flops, or oh, maybe I should pack a couple more sundresses. So when you first packed your suitcase, you were able to zip it really easily, right? And then you keep adding more, and eventually you can't get it zipped without the help of somebody else. So in this example, your suitcase is your fat cell. The clothes or your flip-flops are the sugar that you need to get out of your bloodstream. And the insulin is the person zipping the suitcase. So, you put in your clothes, the pancreas is told to release insulin, which is the person zipping this. Oh my gosh, so confusing. I hope you guys are getting this. Your insulin comes and it's going to be the bag zipper upper. So really easy to do. So your body's working really great. Now you go and stuff in 10 more outfits and it's getting a little harder. So your body sends in another person. Somebody's going to sit in on top of the bag while the other person zips it. So we're producing a little bit more insulin to get the job done, right? Then we go back in and we start cramming more in. We just keep putting more stuff in the suitcase. And this is the fat cell again. And so all of a sudden, it doesn't matter how much insulin your body produces, the pancreas produces, we cannot get this thing zipped up. So now you've got, in my family, I guess Coleman would come sit on top of the suitcase and Cameron would jump on top of it and Kyle would jump on top of it and I'd be trying to zip it up. And that's when we're going to start seeing that the blood sugar stays high in the bloodstream because we can't pack it away anywhere else. Also with diabetes, when your blood sugar is, when your insulin's having a hard time getting it into the fat cells, it starts pushing it other places. And this is when we see type 2 diabetes really wreak havoc on people because it'll start shoving it in the eyeballs. It'll start shoving it in blood vessels. It'll start shoving it into nerves. And you know what? The sugar doesn't belong there. And so that's where we get the problems of nerve damage, the diabetic neuropathies. That's when we get the eye damage, the diabetic retinopathies, because sugar doesn't belong there and it's damaging those organs. And so really long analogy. Thanks for hanging with me, guys. So what can you do? Well, I have a coach who's a really good friend of mine. Her name is Marianne, and she's an endocrinologist, and she actually uses the program that I coach with her patients because that's all she does is like thyroid and diabetes. I'm sure she does more, but those are the two big ones, thyroids and diabetes. But she actually uses this program because it works better than just throwing more insulin at them. So let's finish this analogy up real quick. Let's say all of a sudden you have to, okay, so now we're going to use insulin from an outside source to help zip that suitcase shut, right? So we're going to invite our neighbors over to help you get this suitcase closed and ready to get on the airplane. And so now the neighbors are the insulin that you're going to inject into yourself. Those are the extra helpers. So now you're using this extra insulin and guess what? It's going to do the job because now you've got like 10 people pushing on this suitcase and it's going to get the blood sugar out of your bloodstream. And so now it looks like from the outside that you are like a compliant diabetic. Your blood sugars in the morning are looking good. But over time, it's just going to take more and more people to get that suitcase zipped up. It's just going to take more and more insulin to get the same job done. And meanwhile, giving you all of that extra insulin is damaging those organs. So again, what are you told in the mainstream medical society or whatever is eat less, move more. Well, that doesn't work very well because it ends up being that if you don't have really specific instructions, it's really wonky, it's not consistent, and you're not seeing results. So then you throw it in the trash and you say, just never mind. And then the next time you go back to the doctor, they're telling you that you need more insulin to get the same job done. So one of my biggest loves is absolutely reversing this process. So now let's take that analogy and unpack it. We're going to unpack the suitcase. So what happens when you eat in such a way where we can start unpacking the suitcase, unpacking that fat cell, right? So you go on a meal program that allows you to burn fat. And as soon as you start burning fat for energy, this is the part of the program I love the most. Number one, your energy goes through the roof. Number two, hunger and cravings go away. And number three, what happens is we start unpacking that suitcase. So you're eating your carbs, your protein, your calories, all of the good things, but any extra energy you need to get through the day to help your lungs breathe, to pump your heart, to walk your body down the street, to lift whatever you're doing, to exercise, or just to work and do your normal body movements, you're going to move into the fat stores and start burning fat for energy. Fat comes out of the fat cell, it gets converted to energy, ketones, and all sorts of other things, and you burn that for energy. So for diabetics, what's going to happen is that you're taking clothes out of that suitcase in this analogy. And as you do that, all of a sudden, the pancreas and the insulin that is needed every time you put food in your mouth to be, gosh, this is a really hard analogy. I hope you guys are catching on. I hope you guys are catching what I'm throwing down. So as we're unpacking the suitcase, all of a sudden there's not so many people needed to get that suitcase closed. So the fat cell is able to close easier, which means that when we want to open it and throw one item in because you ate a sandwich and you've got some sugar in your blood that needs to be moved out of the blood system, then what happens is, Linda, you're going to have to go back and watch this, girl. I've gotten really far on this. I think you'll like it. Hey, Jim, how you doing? Hey, Patricia, Aunt Patricia. So as we start to unpack the fat cell, unpack that suitcase, now all of a sudden you don't need as many people to be able to close the darn thing, right? So in remembering, the less people we need to close the suitcase, that's your insulin. So now your body is sending out the signal for the pancreas to release insulin when you eat something, and it just needs a little bit because you don't have that suitcase so packed that it takes 10 people to close it while you're trying to zip it and they're trying to stand on top of it. So as we unpack those fat stores, as we unpack that suitcase, less and less people, which is your insulin, is needed to get the job done of getting the sugar out of your blood system. And so what happens is when we put people on a really healthy eating plan that's going to allow them to burn a little bit of fat, their insulin needs are decreased drastically. And so over time, their own body's insulin is now sufficient to get the job done without needing all of that extra insulin from an outside source. Guys, I hope this makes sense. Oh my gosh, in my head it's so beautiful, but it's really hard to explain. And it took a long time to even come up with an analogy like that that would work. So if you're confused, I'm very sorry. Reach out to me and we'll have a conversation. But I absolutely love being able to help people reverse something that nobody ever tells you about. You know, if you cut yourself, a Band-Aid's the job. That's all that's needed, right? It's going to heal and you're going to do great. But when insulin is thrown at a type 2 diabetic, it's masking. It's just covering up the problem. We're just not going to see the unsightly cut, but it's still going to be there. It's still going to be bleeding. And the more and more insulin we're throwing at it, you're still bleeding. You're bleeding profusely through the Band-Aid, but we're just throwing more and more at you, and it's not solving the problem. It's just covering up the symptoms. So whereas with, oh my goodness, I just got myself a little bit lost. Hey, Jacqueline. Hey, Diane. Thanks for tuning in. So you keep throwing insulin at people, throwing it at them, and their blood sugars look great. But that's not really the true story. All we've done is lower the blood sugar level, but what's happening behind the scenes is this sugar is being shoved into places that it has no business being, like in those nerves, the diabetic neuropathies, and in those eyes. And that's how we start hearing about amputations, because you damage all of that tissue by throwing sugar in it where it doesn't belong, but the insulin just knows to shove it where it can, and it's run out of room in the fat store, so it just starts moving on to other organs and other cells that don't store sugar, and it just wrecks the body one system at a time. So anyway, I hope that analogy worked out for everybody and that it made sense. Send me a message and let me know if you caught the ball on what I was trying to go for there. And absolutely, let's have a conversation if you are struggling with prediabetes or type 2 diabetes, because I can help, and I'm helping a lot of people do that right now. If you have any friends that need to see this video, if you think they'll understand what the heck I was talking about there, tag them in this video so they can see it as well. And I will try to bring more celebrations as they come about. You know, getting people off of insulin, getting people off of hypertensive medications, getting them off of their cholesterol meds. All of these things are so important. So when we're looking at getting healthy, it's the overall picture. Are you healthy or are you just losing weight? Because those are two different things. So we want to work on getting the weight off so we can get to a healthy body, but also being able to do all the other things that go with that. I thought the dog was on the floor, but it's actually just a pair of my PJ pants. I was like, wait a second. So anyway, guys, I hope you got some value from this. Send me a message if you have any questions, and I can clarify anything that was weird for you. And I hope everybody has a good night. Bye, guys.